Hi, everybody. Sorry for that. I have to tell you that I've been here since 2 hours ago, just checking everything, just to make sure that everything would be fine. But then in the end, sorry for that. It's my problem with technicians and this sort of things. So I would like to start this session by saying that as a founder member of SCORE, I'm very happy to be with you, to welcome all of you to this session. Okay, sorry, I was just doing the final arrangements here. To welcome all of you to this session where we are going to discuss tobacco harm reduction, ethics, and human rights in Latin America. My name is Mônica Gorgulho, and I'm a Brazilian psychologist. Latin America is estimated to have the higher number of smokers than in any other region of the globe. And one of the reasons for that could be the number of young people that we have in the region, which could be counted around 106 million of tobacco users. In general, there has been an important decrease in the number of smokers, especially among men in the region. But smoking-related mortality continue to be a very important issue for the health authorities. These health problems and mortality can be counted around 7 million people at risk of tobacco-related disease and mortality. If on one hand we have a very high number of smokers, on the other hand, we have the number of users of electronic devices for smoking. Despite being consistently growing, it is still small. This situation, this final picture, we can understand as a result of a disagreement inside the scientific community, plus a lack of clear government policies. To tell you more about the present scenario of Latin American tobacco consumption and the solutions the region has been building, we'll have with you today, or with us today, Zara Snapp from Mexico, Alexandro Lucian from Brazil, Enrique Teran from Ecuador, and Alejandra Medina from Colombia. I will introduce each of them in a very short bio, just to make this session a little bit more dynamic. They are much more than what I'm going to present to you now. But you can go to Google and research them at any time you want, and then you see how active this region has been in the last years related to tobacco harm reduction. So we will start with Zara Snapp. Hi, Zara. Zara has a degree in political science from the University of Colorado and a master's degree in public policy from Harvard University. She's the author of Drugs Dictionary and a co-founder of Instituto RIA, a civil society organization, basically working with research and advocacy within a social justice, development, and peace-building framework. With you, Zara.
Thank you very much, Mônica, for the introduction, and I'm pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation to the organizers. Here in Mexico, so it's 8 a.m., so this is a busy time in my household as we get everybody ready to go to school and work and all of those things, so apologies for any distractions that might show up, but thank you very much for having me. So I'm going to be speaking a little bit about the Mexican scenario and also about harm reduction and human rights in nicotine and tobacco use. And anyone can feel free to contact, I think this way I can get out of there. There we go. So at Instituto RIA, we have primarily focused, and we like to call it full spectrum harm reduction. And so while this is harm reduction in the traditional sense of how do we reduce possible risks that people are taking in their consumption of both legal and illegal drugs, although we have obviously been primarily focused on currently illegal drugs. We also talk about how do we reduce the harms of policies? How do we understand that many of the policies that our governments are putting into place cause harm in the lives of people? Some of those who are using these substances, and oftentimes many people who are not necessarily using the substance, but that might be engaged in some way in the licit or illicit markets that exist. And obviously, coming from Mexico, we also have many people who are harmed by prohibition and by a lack of regulation around psychoactive substances that have grave consequences within our justice system, that have grave consequences within development, within the capacity of people to really be able to think about the livelihoods that they want for their lives, for their families, and for their communities. And so we really look at it from a very broad-based, and I heard some of the previous speakers talking about harm reduction, so I don't think I need to talk too much about it, but how do we really also think about the policies and reducing harm that they do? And then the other piece, the component that I think is important to bring up, is how do we manage pleasure? And in Spanish, it maybe works better, that term of gestionar placer, ¿no? ¿Cómo gestionamos placer? How do we ensure that it's not only about reducing risks and harms, but understanding that with greater information, with a greater understanding of what you're consuming, with more responsible consumption, you will enjoy it more, and that might also reduce certain risks that you have. So this is something that we explore as a means of really having a much broader framework around risk and harm reduction. As I said, we've been primarily focused on currently illegal drugs. However, we also work around the use of alcohol and the use of tobacco and nicotine. We have noticed, obviously, around this, that there's these contradictory discourses by governments where maybe they are taking a harm reduction perspective, possibly only in discourse, not in action, around illegal drugs, but that with legal drugs, they're unwilling to have that conversation. And as my colleague and Alejandra's colleague, Julian Quintero, said, they have one message around nicotine and tobacco use, which is you either quit or you die. Those are the two streams, those are your two options, and there's nothing around harm reduction, and there's nothing around really, providing information to people who are consuming these substances beyond this is, as another colleague said, advertising terrorism, where it's only that you're putting these images that are visually very, very difficult to take in on the packaging. And so we need to be able to highlight these contradictory discourses by governments and propose new strategies, no? And that's what I think we're trying to do both in this session and then also as a region, thinking about how do we take down this dichotomy that they've put on the table. And I would say there's also a dichotomy about the funding around these discourses, and I'm sure other folks in these previous sessions have brought it up. It's like there's the Bloomberg funders where it's you must abstinence quit, or the tobacco industry, and there's no middle ground. And so really folks are having to take very strong positions one way or the other, and then you're either accused of being these prohibitionists that are on one side, or in with the industry on the other side. So really, I think there's a lot more nuance that needs to be brought out in the political discourse. So conventional cigarettes, as we know, they contain tar, carbon monoxide, and other chemicals, but why aren't other alternatives available? And especially in our region, which we're going to talk about today. And we have studies that have not necessarily been, as the government would say, with conflicts of interest, where it shows that heat not burn devices have lower cancer potencies, and that we really need to be working on how do we engage an understanding that some of those products and those devices might reduce risk and harm for people who are using. And then another topic that I'm not going to be able to get into because we have such short amount of time today is really around who would transition with proper regulation to some of these products. It might, currently the cheapest products on the market are conventional cigarettes. That's what folks have access to. And in my context, for example, they sell single cigarettes. And so that's what people with scarce resources are buying, a single cigarette as they go to work or back and forth. And so who would possibly transition if there was greater access and if it was more cost effective to get some of these other products if they were if they were equal to how much conventional cigarettes currently cost. So why do people use nicotine? They use it, and tobacco, they use it because of the same other substance that we use other substances, because there is a sense of increased well-being. Perhaps, though, we have focused on that we haven't provided education around the consumption. So then we have to think about, when you are smoking a cigarette, or when you are vaping, or when you are using an electronic cigarette, are you, in the moment enjoying it? Are you, or is it a stress relief? And so then it also inclines, it combines with conversations that we need to be having, bigger conversations around how do we live in the moment of what we're doing. We know that when people inhale whatever they're using, it does relax them, because you take a deeper breath than you would in your normal breathing. And so we need to think about that. How are we can't just take something away from somebody that is providing well-being to them. We would have to, one, consider alternatives, or two, really think about how do we just create better understanding and awareness of what we're using and we're putting in our bodies. And so under Mexican law, only one form of administration is currently allowed, which is conventional cigarettes. No other form of administration. And obviously, in Mexico, we've started exploring what would it look like to really think about, who has tobacco plants in their home? What would cultivation of tobacco, and you being able to think about, like, how would I use tobacco in its different forms of administration, which links it to the traditional use of how traditional communities and indigenous communities have been able to use it in many ways. There's a total lack of participation of people who use nicotine and tobacco in the policies that affect them. This is damaging to the human rights of those people. We recognize that, and we're thinking about how do you engage that? And we see it within our own government that they're unwilling to open that spaces. And obviously there's an exclusive focus on possible underage use without considering the human rights of people who use nicotine. In Mexico, this concept of the right to the free development of personality has been used often and is in the jurisprudence around cannabis use. And so I think we need to be thinking about how that can also be used within tobacco and nicotine use. So in Mexico, just to give a quick panorama, because I know I'm running out of time already, in February 2020, there was a presidential decree that prohibited the importation of vaporizers. This was a response to the US crisis around illegal vaping of cannabis products that had, illegal cannabis products that had vitamin E added to them. So obviously this didn't even have anything to do with nicotine or tobacco use, but this was the catalyst for that. And being neighbors to the United States, obviously this, what happens there has a great impact on our national policies. In July 2021, there was a supposed lifting of the prohibition on the importing of heated tobacco products, but not so fast, because then the president later that day said, no, anything that harms health will not be allowed. So there's also been this kind of clash of, wait, you can't prohibit this based on our import-export laws, but then the president says, no, you can, and they find a way to continue to have that prohibition. Electronic cigarettes were already illegal since May 2008, when the general law for tobacco control was passed. But this took the prohibition to a higher level with the presidential decree. In Mexico, 1.5 million people said they had vaped in the last year in the national survey on use. In 2016, 2017, 15 million people said they smoked. So there really is an opportunity to reduce risks and harms by having that transition happen from smoking conventional cigarettes. But it all remains to be seen. There was a legal case in November 2020, which allows a certain company to still sell their tobacco heating devices on a national level, but that's because they won a court case. And so really there's also there's a disjointedness about what is the access to the market, the current market. And when we think about the reality of the current market, it's online sales, it's unregulated sales, irregular substances that are put into these devices, and it's difficult to assure quality controls. And so this is something that's very important that we need to be how do we really put health at the center instead of putting prohibition at the center, which has been the focus of the US government, of the Mexican government. So the Mexican Supreme Court also determined that allowing e-cigarettes and other devices that are used exclusively for tobacco should be allowed. but they upheld the prohibition on commercializing products that could be used to consume other substances. And this is obviously their response to, well, we don't want people using cannabis, which is still currently illegal in Mexico, or other substances. And we come, these things come out in the newspaper of, well, people are going to be able to vape methamphetamine if we allow this to exist, So there's also a real misinformation that's provided around this issue. And then the health secretary currently denies that there are fewer risks from non-combustion. If you go to our commissioner on addictions, his Twitter, the last 2 posts that he has are about this issue and they have videos where they're saying there is no scientific evidence that is free from conflict of interest. Again, demonstrating that there is no evidence, there are no studies that are done without the tobacco industry being involved that shows that these products are less damaging to health or that they facilitate abstaining from smoking. And so they're really ignoring a lot of the evidence that other countries are seeing. And I think it's we're going to be doing our advocacy work to try and have them understand a bit more about this, but it is definitely an uphill battle because of the bias that already exists. So some of our recommendations, and this is also the current recommendations from the government and the current initiatives that are in the different, the Senate or in the Congress, are to increase taxes, prohibit online sales, and prohibit any flavors. So really they have one mode of going at this. There's no harm reduction considered, only abstinence. And when we think about what could be at the table, it's really about how do we include providing high quality alternative products, heat not burn devices, cigarettes, vaporizers, even snuff as an interesting idea. Commercialized products in specialized stores where harm reduction information and interventions can be provided to users. So how do we really, instead of pushing users who might be vaping or using other products out into this illegal market, why are we not bringing them closer to health institutions, which is the same message that we have really around illegal substances as well. How do we educate doctors and the medical profession regarding these alternatives, including patches, gum, and therapy, but also thinking about what is it that the user they enjoy inhaling. There is something relaxing to that process. And then this is, really our recommendation about all substance use, whether it's illegal or legal or unregulated, which is meeting people where they're at, not where you want them to be. We want to ensure that any person has access to what they think they want and need, that they also have access to information so that they can help inform their decisions about their body, but that really they have the autonomy and the sovereignty around their body and the tools to be able to do that. Also, I'm speaking about this as people who are adults, not underage. But this is something that we need to be focusing on. Rather than thinking that you can just scare people into making changes, really you need to meet them where they're at, offer them information, offer them interventions, offer them alternatives. And when they're ready, when they want to make those changes, they will do that transition or not. And it's up to them, because we really should have autonomy over our own selves. And with that, I'm going to stop because I know we have great presentations on the way. Thank you. And my contact.
My microphone, yeah.
Yeah.
Zara, thank you very much. I could see that you were running because you wanted to bring us so many information. But thank you. I think that you point out very important issues, at least for me, when you talk about pleasure. This is something that I really wanted to be able to discuss with you in the end. So, guys, I will make you a little sign like that when your time is going to the end, right? Just make sure that we have time for the debate in the end. So the next speaker is going to be Alejandro Hazard Lucian. Alejandro is a Brazilian journalist. He started working with tobacco in 2015 after 15 years of smoking cigarettes, and managed to quit it only by the use of electronic cigarettes, vaping. And he considers this device to be a life-saving product. In 2021, he became a founder member of DIRETA, an associative, no-governmental and no-profit organization, acting as president of the first initiative of this kind in Brazil. So with you, Alejandro.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alejandro Lucian. I'm 40 years old, a former smoker who had my life saved by electronic cigarettes. I'm a journalist, an activist, and president of DIRETA, as Monica said, the first Brazilian association about tobacco harm reduction. I started smoking late in my 20s, but after 15 years, I was consuming 3 packs a day every single day. I tried to quit in every way you can think of, using willpower, patches, chewing gum, medicine, and other methods. But after so many failures, I have given up trying, even knowing how my health could be affected in the future. One day, I discovered the existence of a device called electronic cigarette or vaping. A friend of mine told me that they could help me quit smoking, and after some research, I found out some interesting things about them. The products were not from the tobacco industry. They were far less harmful than smoking. The sales, importation, and advertising of these products were banned in Brazil since 2009, and there was already a large illegal market offering the products. So I had to make a decision. If I wanted to try to quit smoking using vaping, I would have to turn myself into a criminal and buy an illegal product. Otherwise, I will have to keep smoking. And since that I'm here talking to you, you can already imagine what I did. And it was without any doubt the best thing in my life. Because on May 3rd, 2015, I received my first vaping device, and that decision literally saved my life. And with great surprise, by quitting smoking so easily, I wanted to know more about vaping. So I started studying. And since there was very little information in Portuguese at that time, I decided to create a project called vaporaqui.net. It's a blog to share my story and gather information about tobacco harm reduction. The website grew into a multi-platform project with groups on Facebook, WhatsApp, and Telegram, YouTube channel, Instagram page, and a large network of knowledge, which turned my idea into a reference in Brazil. I started being invited to interviews, lectures, and got involved in the regulatory process, participating in public hearings at Anvisa, our regulatory agency. So over the years, I became some kind of symbol in the fight to regulate vaping in Brazil, receiving almost daily testimonies from people thanking me personally for the content I was making and for my activism. People who were finally able to quit smoking using these products with stories so similar to mine that they could have been written by myself. Although I have never been involved in sales, I was completely surprised when I began to be publicly attacked by health organizations, and also I received 2 government lawsuits against me. But why was that? Well, let me give you an overview about vaping in Brazil. After 6 years working with tobacco harm reduction and being deeply involved in the community of electronic cigarettes consumers, I can give you a very real picture of what happens here, which has some similarities with other countries. We found ourselves in the middle of a war of agendas, and the interests of the consumers are the least of the priorities. On one hand, we have consumers who had their lives saved by vaping, and so many others that could benefit from it. On the other hand, these people were not recognized by our government agencies or by the health organizations' offices. These bodies' ideas are not based on updated science, but on ideology and the defense of a prohibition that does not bring benefits to the public health. Of course, we have to remember that all the science we have today indicates without a shadow of doubt that e-cigarettes are not 100% safe, and they are harmful for our health. However, compared to the conventional cigarettes, they are much less harmful. So if a smoker is unable or unwilling to stop smoking, the exchange of one thing for another, it's a very good recommendation. I believe everyone here is aware of cases like the UK, which not only incorporate the product into its public health services, but also encourage adult smokers to switch from cigarettes to vaping. In addition, we have countries like Canada, New Zealand, and many others are applying tobacco harm reduction initiatives to greatly improve the lives of smokers. But here in Brazil, things are quite different, and the prohibition of sales continues. Despite that, in recent years, there has been an explosion of illegal sales with thousands of online stores, physical stores, tobacco shops, and even on streets, and things are not getting better. More recently, we are seeing an epidemic of the use of disposable pods being consumed by teenagers in nightclubs and restaurants without knowing the potential risks and harms of these products. This only proves the prohibition is ineffective. And the most ironic thing is that this is the result of the fear and the terrorism that Brazilian health organizations apply in their campaigns, trying to avoid consumption by scaring the population, which ends up steering the public away from scientific information. And this results in two problems. Firstly, there are adult smokers who could benefit from vaping, but they believe it is as harmful or even more harmful than smoking. And secondly, there are non-smokers who believe that vaping is harmless. As an expert on vaping, I must say that electronic cigarettes can help people stop smoking, but under no circumstances should they be used by non-smokers. But at the same time, e-cigarettes should be considered for smokers, since they have immense potential in improving their health. And I'm very concerned about what is happening in Brazil. And despite activism being so important, it's by far not enough. I always knew my work on social media wouldn't be sufficient to change things. For months, I have made contacts and partnerships, and we are made to form a team capable of developing serious work on reducing the harm caused by smoking in Brazil. So, DIRETA was created. DIRETA is a non-governmental, non-profit organization in an associative format composed by professionals from different fields with extensive experience in their own subjects. It's a multidisciplinary team that includes specialized health professionals, former members of a regulatory agency, and especially consumers of electronic cigarettes, being a part of the first organization of its kind in this country. The main objective of DIRETA is to educate the civil society, policymakers, health professionals, and even the industry about the risks and harms of smoking and the existing alternatives that can improve the lives of consumers of nicotine. DIRETA is based on science, not on ideologies. And Brazil is currently experiencing an incorrect use of vaping because without any control or inspection, they are being used on a large scale. There is easy access to products by non-smokers, while adult smokers are deprived of access that could mean the same salvation I had in my life. So we urgently need to talk about reducing the harm caused by smoking, not only in Brazil, but in the whole world. And we must be based on science and not on ideology or economic and personal interests. There is absolutely no room to deny what harm reduction can do for our society. So I invite everyone to know about our work by visiting our website, direta.org. And that's it for today. Thank you very much, Monica. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, we thank you, Alejandro. It's very nice to see how you can be live and you can be energetic in your speech. And so this is how I met Alejandro for the first time. So it's always very interesting when we have the chance to talk with him. And again, he brought some very important issues. When you go to visit DIRETA website, you see there is a session, a space there with personal testimonies. People who have used electronic devices or any kind of other method of harm reduction for tobacco. So you can see their stories there. And it's very interesting and it's very touching to realize that there are real people behind the numbers. So, okay, I invite all of you to go to DIRETA and see what the beautiful work they are doing there. Okay, our next speaker is going to be Dr. Enrique Teran. Enrique is a medical doctor. He has a PhD in pharmacology, and currently he's a professor at the School of Medicine in Universidad San Francisco de Quito. And for more than 25 years, he has been working with research, public policies, and regulatory pathways. Enrique is the author of more than 90 papers published in peer-reviewed journals. And he is also a member of the Ecuadorian Academy of Medicine and the Academy of Science of Ecuador. And especially for the last 5 years, he has advocated publicly for tobacco harm reduction, being a found member of the Latin American Network for Tobacco Harm Reduction, HELDAD. So Enrique, please.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me for this interesting meeting. It's for me a pleasure to try to share with you some ideas regarding what is the situation regarding the medical community in the tobacco harm reduction. What are the ethical aspects that should be taken in consideration? It's quite important that to put in perspective the problem, COVID-19 pandemic has been responsible at least for 4.5 million of deaths worldwide. And it has raised the concern of several organisms, associations, and decision makers all around the world about what to do. However, taking consideration that yearly there are more than 7 million deaths directly related to tobacco consumption. So we need to get back the attention to those problems that are still present and will be still present. For 2030, it's expected that 8 million deaths will be directly related to tobacco consumption. So something is needed to do. There is no doubt that tobacco consumption has been reducing during the time. This is a small picture regarding what happened in several countries, taking in consideration Chile, that is among the region, the one with the highest rate of consumption. We have here Colombia, for example, with the lowest one, and in the last decade, it has been reducing. However, it's not enough because it is pretty much dependent on what statistic are you using. The first one belongs to PAHO, Pan American Health Organization, where you can see numbers that are discordant with a recent publication in the Lancet Global Health, where we can see, for example, in the case of my country, we are talking here around 12%, while here it is 28%. What is one of the reasons for that? That unfortunately, although several actions has been put in place, we are a growing process all among the region about commercialization and consumption of illegal tobacco. That is important because it's not only the fact that illegal tobacco is harmful, it promotes also other very risky activities like child labor, informal work, and drug trafficking. It's quite important that it exposes children, particularly minors, to be joining this harmful activity because it is completely under control. It's not a matter to reflect the numbers, what sales of formal tobacco is showing. It's important to consider that we are with an additional problem. Another important point that was raised in the previous session is the refusal from several organizations, including World Health Organization, to openly discuss the use of alternatives to cigarette smoke. We clearly state here Smoke is dangerous. Smoke is not healthy. We need to do all kinds of efforts for smoking cessation. We need to put all kinds of efforts to prevent new smokers, particularly in younger people. However, what to do with those people that is already smoking? We fail from the medical point of view in only suggest you have to stop smoking. That is not a solution. We need to put in perspective any kind of support for those people that want to leave smoking, that need to stop smoking, but unfortunately are not having help with the current pharmacological strategies. Everyone knows that nicotine is an addictive substance and it's not easy to leave consumption of nicotine. But if we can get alternatives to reduce, and the key word is reduce the harm, all those alternatives need to be taken, need to be considered, and need to be discussed openly. The problem is that refuse to talk about make difficult the process, make illicit the process, and then create a parallel problem that is what we are facing all among the region. It's quite important that when we review what is happening with new smokers, most of all them around the region in Latin America are joining to tobacco because regulations are not the proper ones. In most of the countries, it's prohibited to sell cigarettes to people under 18 years. However, not always it is accomplished in our region. From the point of the minimal selling, so we need to take in consideration the possibility to get alternatives openly discussed. For physicians, for healthcare professionals, it's important to get the advice for patients that are currently smoking, how we can support you to move from your current situation to a less harmful situation. Ideally, reduced harm products are not an alternative for maintaining the risk, but are a good option to reduce that process and to provide patients with an effective alternative to reduce consumption progressively and to get an alternative to at a certain point, leave smoking. We hope and we aim that in Latin American countries, this can be an open discussion and that we as a region can take actions close to our reality to obtain better results than the current ones. This is my contribution for the later discussion. Thank you for your attention.
Enrique, we thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Guys? Yeah, good. We thank you. I was really thinking here how many important themes that you guys has brought so far, And each one of them could provoke a whole debate. For example, when you talk about how prohibition insists on looking at the situation, I cannot understand that, because they make a cut and they take a piece of the whole scenario and they just work on that thing. Because when you talk about the whole chain of problems that we have with the illegal cigarettes and illegal production of cigarettes, so this is something that we have to consider and to take into account when we go really for a responsive answer to the whole problem. And some other things that you brought, for example, comparing to the COVID pandemic. So look what happened to the world with 4.5 million people dead. And how we keep on going with the same strategy for working with the 7 million deaths in the world every year related to tobacco. So I could keep on bringing some important issues here, but we'll leave it to the debate. And now we are going to our next speaker, Maria Alejandra Medina. She has a degree, she's from Colombia, and she has a degree in government and international relations. She also has a master's in social responsibilities and sustainability. It seems to me that it's both from the University of Externado de Colombia. Is that right, Medina? Alejandra, is that right? Yeah. And since 2017, she's been working at Corporación Acción Técnica Social, running projects and research on risk and harm reduction in legal and illegal psychoactive substances. And since 2018, she is involved with tobacco harm reduction from public policy advocacy, public health and human rights, and participation right. So with you, Alejandra Medina.
Thank you. Before I begin, I would like to thank the Scientific Summit for having a panel to discuss the current situation in Latin America regarding new nicotine delivery products and the needs to adopt harm reduction for one of the most consumed substances in our continent. To complete their approaches, my presentation will focus on the importance of participation. When we talk about legal and illegal drug use, it has begun to be recognized that all aspects of approaching this situation have human rights implications. This has been the result of long process of social mobilization, activism, and advocacy in national and international decision-making that continues faces new challenges. So here we have a general mapping of human rights when we talk about drugs, including nicotine and tobacco. It is important to understand the human rights of nicotine users as a broad spectrum of guarantees that go beyond a legal market of electronic devices or nicotine-containing products. On the other hand, a human rights approach responds to a comprehensive and differential attention to the specific needs of each population group, and it is proportional to the risk of each alternative, from electronic cigarettes, vaping, to medication and replacement therapies. Indeed, nicotine users and smokers have right to enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. I want to hear, and is also necessary to address the social and economic determinants related to healthy habits. This social justice component it's fundamental in Latin America, given that many people do not have access to information and service related to healthy habits. Second, freedom to thought, expression, and access to information. This includes the right to hold opinions, express ideas, seek information about nicotine and harm reduction. Third, very interesting, the right to benefit from scientific process and its implications. And finally, a fourth right, the right to personal autonomy and identity that protects the individual's right to self-determination. In addition, we of course agree to uphold and enforce the human rights obligation of governments to particular groups, such as children and adolescents and women's, of course. So let's move on. In this context, the governments have the essential purpose of facilitating the participation of all people in decision-making that affect them. That is to say, participation is not only a desirable practice, but the governments has the obligation to facilitate, promote, and sponsor it. Thus, I would like to emphasize that first, harm reduction in consolation, open the, in particular, people who use nicotine and other communities most be involved in decisions that impact them. Second, people need to be at the core of decision about their health. And finally, nicotine user and harm reduction NGO can play an important role in the analysis of the nicotine use phenomenon. I'm going to jump in this because we want to have a discussion time. So to understand the degree of participation of smoker, we analyze the case of traditional cigarette regulation, a highly accepted and international endorsed process. We found that during the formulation, even evaluation cycle, there has no meaningful participation of smoker at either the national or international level. For example, at the international level, at the COP, out of 21 NGOs with observer member status, 0% are nicotine or organization of tobacco users. That is to say that this discussion scenario led by the World Health Organization has no far allowed the participation of any organization representing nicotine users. In addition, there is a high stigmatization of tobacco harm reduction advocacy organization. In Latin America, currently, we have a context of participation in this issue. I'm going to say that it's characterized by an utilitarian and asymmetric relation between governments and the civil society groups, in which population is involved without having an important place in decision-making process. In this, the government controls the participation process and prioritizes the orientation that suits its own interest. In addition, there is an increase in the number of stakeholders interested in participating, as well as different vision and proposals for regulations and approach. So in my opinion, I want to say that where we should participation be headed is through our social pressure and mobilization for an open political environment and a strong collective entity to achieve effective participation. Empower and consultative participation means that users of nicotine are in the center of the decision making, breaking down barriers to participate and change the traditional information models. As part of our call to action, we want to emphasize that we cannot allow social dismobilization and disinterest in decision making, because it is open the way to paternalist relations, authoritarianism, populism, among others. I know that we don't have more time. I just want to say that we are concerned about the social mobilization of nicotine users, especially in the context of new evidence, new products, and of course, regulations. So here is our platform, and to ensure that intervention and comprehensive and effective nicotine harm reduction platforms propose these following principles. At the same time, we have a statement with 8 goals, which sets our opinion, our position, and our key issues and our lines of work. The organization that you can see here are some of ones we have worked with more closely. They are located in different countries such as Spain, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, Peru, Panama, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Brazil, among others. And we admire them for their work. Finally, I just want to go to a very quickly overview about regulation in Colombia. unlike other countries such as Brazil or Mexico, where the trend towards some degree of prohibition is stronger, in Colombia, after 6 bills presented in Congress for the last 7 years, today we have 2 bills to regulate electronic cigarettes. However, we have first project that seeks to regulate all new products equal to tobacco, which will imply many risks for smokers and few guarantees of access to the new alternatives. However, we have a second bill, which we have technically advised, which has the objective to regulate in a different manner. We believe that this, if approved, will be very good precedent in Latin America and will achieve better results in health, human rights, and participation. We know it is not a perfect bill, but if you would like more information about this bill, please do not doubt to contact us. And this concludes my intervention. Thank you for all.
Okay, Alejandra, you were very quick. Thank you for that. So guys, I would like to say that the formal part of this session is done. So we managed very well to have all the presentations. The technicians worked very well, so everybody could deliver your message. So very good for that. So now I would like to invite all of you. We have had a lightly growing number of participants in our session, so I'm very happy about that. And I can see that there are lots of people who are not from Latin America, possibly don't know very much about Latin America. This is time for you guys to get all the information that you would like to have, the curiosities. You can ask everything you want, just relax. And now we will start our chat about the situation of tobacco harm reduction here in Latin America. So, Angel, I understand that you would send me some questions. So far, no questions. So please, if you want to send your questions, do that in the chat area. But I have a lot of questions, so I can start with this. I don't know if you speakers would like to ask anything to any other speaker. I don't know if you would like to start this debate. No? Can I do that? Good. So the very first thing for me is all the difficulties that we have had here in Latin America related to legislation. I know that the situation is very similar in other parts of the world, but here I think that it's a little bit more complicated because we have a sort of informal way of dealing with the legal policies that we have from the governments and then et cetera. So I would like to give you again the opportunity to talk a little bit more about what each country is doing to deal with the government prohibitions, the groups, prohibitionist groups in the country, and how are you dealing with the difficulties of making the debate a little bit larger than what we have formally in our countries. Okay, you can take anyone. There's no order to talk, so please.
Well, I can go first. Oh, go ahead, Alejandro.
Go, Zara. No, please,
Okay.
Zara, please.
No, so what I was going to say is what we're really working on is, on one hand, and building off of the work that Alejandra has been doing in Colombia and you guys have been doing in Brazil, is how do we build a bit of pressure? How do we create a bit of pressure from people who use these products and who are requesting a regulation, it's one of those things where these are funny movements because it's where the users and the consumers are actually wanting, tax me, no? Like, put in place a regulation where I will have to pay taxes and form part of a formal market. And so that's, on one hand, we need to be organizing consumers so that they are demanding this of the government with evidence-based arguments. And then the other thing that we're doing is really around advocacy of how do we reach out to different government officials and see if there is any opening that they're willing to take. Because right now, the public facing message is no, they're completely closed off. But we need to be able to find what are those entrances of folks who might be open to having a dialogue, and at least incorporating either discourse changes or actual policy changes, understanding that this, and how do we get them to move in their understanding that this is not putting public health at the center, the current policy. And if we really want to put public health at the, I mean, people should be hearing Alexandro's testimony of that this has saved his life, and that this isn't just a ploy to get a new market or to create a new niche. And so that's where we have kind of this dual agenda around movement building and around advocacy work directly with the government.
Good. Thank you. I was
going to say that electronic cigarettes were invented in 2003 by an engineer and pharmaceutical worker, Hong Lik. It was never a product from the big tobacco, but despite that, it went for the whole world, entered Europe in 2006, entered United States in 2007, and it really is being consumed mainly by adult ex-smokers, former smokers, because the product works. So there was never a big player behind those products like an industry, tobacco industry. So they conquered the market by itself, and the people who are defending the products are the users. We, the users, are the consumers of those products, are defending this product because we know what the electronic cigarettes and other products have done to our health, to our lives. And it's curious because the consumers are never being accounted for when policies are made, when the legislators discussed about it, because they only work on the prohibition. They only discuss about the way that we must regulate heavily these products, but the users are never listened. And that's until recently, because that's why we founded the DIRETA. It's the first organization of its kind because it's trying to give voice to those consumers, because in Brazil we have several people on YouTube channels, content generators, people who are former smokers who had their lives saved by electronic cigarettes and are trying to change the public opinion by making videos and live streams and talking about vaping, trying to lift this misconception that is as harmful or even more harmful than smoking. So the people who uses the products are those who are trying to get those products by an easy access. And Zara is absolutely right. We want to be taxed. We want to pay taxes to have these products.
Alejandro, thank you very much. I've been just warned that we just have some minutes. I don't know what happened because you guys were so sharp in your presentation. It's possible that I spoke too much. I don't know. Sorry for that. But I just then called the attention for some points that for me are very important. Pleasure, Zara, what you said in the beginning. Human rights, Alejandra, what you said in your presentation. The smokers has the right to keep on smoking if they want, in a way that it's less harmful for them. Dr. Enrique brought us the idea of having the prohibition being, it has to be discussed into the medical society. We have to manage to have a way to bring this to the medical professionals and these people in health, other areas of health professionals, because we have to bring into the health field all these other issues about human rights, participation of the users, like Alejandro was talking about, and many other things. Education is another word that you guys used a lot. How to bring these debates to the society, to the civil society, how to tell them that electronic devices are not as harmful as the smoke, combustible cigarettes, and then et cetera, how to break all the prejudice that is against not the devices, the electronic devices, but any kind of harm reduction approach, then it's not from the pharmaceutical industry. So we could keep on talking and talking here. So I have already some ideas, guys from Latin America, who knows, we can put our efforts together and we can bring some very interesting debate about these very, very practical issues for finding more space for harm reduction, tobacco and harm reduction debate in Latin America. So I would finish thanking you all for participating in this session, the public, the speakers, and especially Zara for you, because guys, Zara has a just 4-week time. I don't know. Yeah.
She's right here.
Yeah, 4-week baby. So Zara, thank you very much. And guys, very good to talk to you again. Bye-bye.